Don't worry, it was empty. Welcome to heaven, jackass.
Whoa, wait a second. I'm live. Am I live? Holy moly, it's working. It's working. It's working. What up? Yo, good boy. He's a good boy. Home. How's it going this evening? Shaggy the Writer coming at you live and direct for the beginning of Pisces season. We are 2 days out from John Steinbeck's birthday, so I wanted to read to you tonight some of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. So go ahead, hit that like button, share, sub. I'm happy this is finally working. Hooray! I got my dogs with me. There's Phoebe and Eddie. They might make some noise. They are awesome though. So just all kinds of love. Continue probably going to sleep right about now. Because he up in Amsterdam, I want to sleep right now, then this will be a good way to put him to sleep. Reading the first part tonight. So without further ado, a few miles south of Soledad, the Salinas River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water is warm too, for it has slipped a pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Galabine Mountains. But on the valley side, the water is lined with trees in every spring, carrying their lower leaf junctures and debris of the winter's flooding, and sycamores with molted white recumbent limbs and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank under the tree, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that a lizard makes a great skittering if he runs across them. Why are you coming up on my PC now? I don't want you right now. Go away. Rabbits come out of the bush and sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with the night tracks of raccoons, with spread pads of dogs from the ranches, and with the split wedge tracks of deer that come from the dark. Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry, I got something going on over here. I'm trying to keep it together. I did not expect this to start working on me, which is still wonderful, but hey, let me just... Through the willows and among the sycamores, a path beaten hard by boys coming down from the ranches to swim in the deep pool, and beaten hard by tramps who come wearily down from the highway in the evening to jungle up near water. In front of the low horizontal limb of a great sycamore, there is an ash pile made by many fires. The limb is worn smooth by men who have sat. The rabbits sat as quietly as little gray sculptured stones. And then from the direction of the state highway came the sound of footsteps on crisp sycamore leaves. The rabbits hurried noisily for cover. The stilted heron labored up in the air and pounded down the river. For a moment the place was lifeless, and even in the open one stayed behind the other. Both were dressed in denim trousers and denim coats with brass buttons. Both wore black shapeless hats, and both carried tight blanket rolls slung over their shoulders. First man was small and quick, dark of the face with restless eyes and sharp, strong forearms. Every part of him was defined: strong, small hands, slender arms, a thin, bony nose. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large, pale eyes, with wide, sloping shoulders. He walked heavy, dragging his feet a little. The first man stopped short in the cleaning, and the follower nearly ran over him. He took his hat and wiped the sweat band with his forefinger and snapped the moisture off. His huge companion dropped his blankets and flung himself down and drank from the surface of the green pool, drank with long gulps, snorting into the water like a horse. The small man stepped nervously behind him.
Lenny, he said sharply. Lenny, for God's sake, don't drink so much.
Lenny continued to snort into the pool. The small man leaned over and shook him by the shoulder.
Lenny, you're gonna be sick like you was last night.
Lenny dipped his whole head under, hat and all, and then he sat up on the bank, and his hat dripped.
George, you take a big drink.
He smiled happily. George unslung his bindle and dropped it gently on the bank.
I ain't sure.
Rose in little splashes. Rings widened around the pool onto the other side and back again. Lenny watched them go.
Oh, look, George, look what I done.
George knelt beside the pool and drank from his hand with, he said hopelessly.
You drink out of the gutter if you was thirsty.
He threw a scoop of water into his face and rubbed it about with his hand, under his chin and around the back of his neck. Then he placed his hat, pushed himself back from the river, drew up his knees, and embraced them. Lenny, who'd been watching, imitated George exactly. He pushed himself back, drew up his knees, embraced them, looked over to George to see whether he had it just right. He pulled his hat down a little more over his eyes, the way George's hat was. George stared morosely at the water. The rims of his eyes were red with sun glare. He said angrily,
We could just as well have rode clear to the ranch a little stretch. God damn near 4 miles, that's what it was. Didn't want to stop at the ranch gate, that's what. 2 stop in Soledad and all. Kicks us out and says, a little stretch down the road. Bet it was more than 4 miles. Damn hot day.
Lenny looked timidly over to him.
George?
What do you want?
George?
Ready, did you? I got to tell you again, do I? Jesus Christ, you're a crazy bastard.
No, you're beautiful.
Yes.
Oh, I forgot, said Lenny softly. I tried not to forget. Honest, Doug.
As well spend all my time telling you things and you forget them when I tell them again.
Tried and tried, said Lenny, but it didn't do no good. I remembered about the rabbits, George.
To hell with the rabbits. That's all you ever care about's them rabbits. Okay, now you listen. On Howard Street and watching the blackboard.
Lenny's face broke into a delighted smile.
Why, sure, George. I remember that. But what we do then? I remember some girls come by and you says you
Bus tickets.
Oh, sure, George. I remember that now.
His hands went quickly into his coat pockets. He's excuse me. There.
You never had none, you crazy bastard. I got both of them here. You think I'd let you carry your own white card?
Lenny sharply at him.
What'd you take out of that pocket?
There ain't a thing in my pocket, said Lenny cleverly.
I know there ain't. You got your hand in here. But what you got in your hand hiding it?
I ain't got nothing, George, honest.
Come here, give it here.
Lenny closed his hand away from George's direction.
It's only a mouse, George.
Give it here, said
George.
Oh, let me have it.
Give it here.
Lenny's closed hand slowly obeyed. George took the mouse and threw it across the pool to the other side, along the bush.
What you want with a dead mouse anyways? Where we's going now?
Lenny looked startled and then embarrassedly hid his face against his knees.
I forgot again.
Jesus Christ, said George resignedly. Well, look, we're gonna work on a ranch like the one we come up from up north.
Up north?
In Weed.
Oh, so remember in Weed?
The ranch we're going to is right down there about a quarter mile. We're gonna go in and see the tickets. But if he sees your work before he learns you talk, we're set. Yeah.
Oh, sure, George, I got it.
Okay.
His face grew tight with thought.
I ain't gonna do nothing. I'll just stand there.
That's a good boy. That's swell. You stay over there 2, 3 times so that you don't forget it.
Lenny droned to himself softly.
I ain't gonna.
Ain't you gonna do no bad things like you did in weed neither.
Lenny looked puzzled.
Here you do it again.
The light of understanding broke on Lenny's face.
They run us out of late.
He exploded triumphantly.
Run us out? Hell, said George disgustedly. We run. They was looking for us, but they didn't catch us.
Lenny grinned happily.
I didn't forget that, you bet.
George raising his head to see whether he was doing it just right.
Nice if I didn't have you on my tail. Or I could leave so easy, maybe even have a goyle.
For a moment, Lenny lay quiet, and then he said hopefully,
We's gonna work on a ranch, George.
Oh, White, you got that. But we're gonna sleep here because I got a reason.
The day was going fast now. On the tops of the Gallivan Mountains flamed with the light of the sun that had gone from the valley. A water snake slipped along on the pool, its head held up like a little periscope. The reeds jerked slightly in the current. Far off toward the highway, a man shouted something as another man shouted back. Sycamore limbs rustled under a little wind, then died immediately.
George, why ain't we going to the ranch and get some supper? They got supper at the ranch.
George rolled on his side. Ration machines on the way down. That means we'll be bucking grain bags, busting a gut. Tonight, I'm going to lay right here and look up. I like it.
Sure we are. Sure we are.
We'll get your sticks together. Then we'll heat them beans and have supper.
Lenny said, I like beans with ketchup. I can't get his voice right. They said, I like beans with ketchup.
Well, we ain't got no ketchup. You go get wood. And don't fool around. It'll be dark before long.
Went softly to himself. There were sounds of splashing down the river in the direction Lenny had taken. George stopped whistling and listened.
Poor bastard.
In a moment, Lenny came crashing. He said brusquely,
Give me that mouse.
but Lenny made an elaborate pantomime of innocence.
Oh, what mouse, George? I ain't got no mouse.
George held out his hand.
Come on, give it to me. You ain't putting nothing over.
Lenny hesitated, backed away, looked wildly at the bush line, as though he contemplated running for his freedom. George coldly,
You're gonna give me that mouse, or do I have to sock you?
Give you what, George?
Give me the goddamn what? I want that mouse.
Lenny reluctantly reached into his pocket. His voice broke a little.
I don't know why I can't keep it. I ain't nobody's mouse. I didn't steal it.
Imperiously, slowly like a terrier who doesn't want to bring a ball to its master. Lenny approached, drew back, approached again. George snapped his fingers sharply, and the sound of Lenny laid a mouse in his hand.
I wasn't doing nothing bad with it, George, just stroking it.
George stood up and threw the mouse as far as he could into the darkening bush, and then he stepped into the pool and washed his hands.
You crazy fool. Don't you think I could see your feet was wet when you walked across the river to get it?
He heard Lenny's whimpering cry and wheeled about.
Blubbering like a baby. Jesus Christ. A big guy like you.
Lenny's lip quivered and tears ran down his eyes.
Oh, Lenny.
George put his hand on Lenny's shoulder.
I ain't taking it away just for meanness. That mouse ain't fresh, Lenny. And besides, you broke it petting it. You get a whole nother mouse that's fresh. I'll let you keep it a little while.
Lenny sat down on the ground and hung his head dejectedly.
I don't know where there's no other mouse. I remember a lady used to give 'em to me ever once she got, but that lady ain't here.
George scoffed. Lady, huh? Don't you even remember who that lady was? That was your own Aunt Clara, and she stopped giving it to you. You always killed 'em. Lenny looked sadly up at him.
They were so little, he said apologetically. I'd pet 'em, and pretty soon they bit my fingers, and I pinched their heads a little, and then they was dead because they was so little. I wishin' we'd get rabbits pretty soon, George. They ain't so little.
To hell with rabbits. And you ain't to be twice. Your Aunt Clara gave you a rubber mouse and you wouldn't have had nothing to do with it.
It wasn't no good to pet,
Said Lenny. The little plane of sunset lifted from the mountain tops, and dusk came into the valley. And the half darkness came among the willows and the sycamores. A big carp rose to the surface of the pool, gulped air, and then sank mysteriously into the dark water again, leaving widening rings on the washes.
You're gonna get that wood, George demanded. There's plenty right up against the back.
Lenny went behind the tree and brought out a litter of dried leaves and twigs. He threw it in a heap on the old ash pile and went back for more and more. It was almost night now. A dove's wings whistled over the water. George undid his bindle and brought out 3 cans of beans. He stood them about the fire, close in against the blaze, not quite touching the flame.
There's enough beans for 4 men, George said.
Lenny walked him from the fire. He patiently.
Ain't God, that's what you want. God almighty, if I was alone, I could live so easy. I could get a job and work and no trouble, no mess at all. And when the end of the month come, I could take my $50 and go into town and get what I have. And I could do all that every damn month. Drink a gallon of whiskey or set a pool room and play cards and shoot pool.
Lenny knelt and looked over the fire at an angry George. Lenny's face was drawn with terror.
And what I got, George went on furiously, I got you. You can't keep a job and you lose me every I get. Just keep shoving all over the country all the time. I gotta get you out.
His voice rose nearly to a shout.
You crazy son of a bitch. You keep me in hot water all the time. You took on the elaborate manner of little girls when they are just mimicking one another. Just wanted to feel that girl's dress. Just wanted to pet it like it was a mouse. Well, how the hell did she know you just wanted to feel a dress? She jerks back and you hold on to it like it was a mouse. She yells and we gotta hide in an irrigation ditch all day with guys looking for us. And we gotta sneak out in the dark. And we gotta get out of the country. All the time, something like that. All the time. I wish I could have put you in a cage with about a million mice and let you have your fun. His anger lit him suddenly. He looked across the fire at Lenny's anguished face, and then looked ashamedly at the flames. It was quite dark now, with the fire lighted the trunks of the trees and the curving branches overhead. Lenny crawled slowly and cautiously along the fire until he was close to George. He sat back on his knees. George turned to the bean cans so that another side faced the fire. He pretended to be unaware of Lenny so close behind him.
George?
Very softly, no answer.
George?
What do you want?
I was only fooling, George. I don't want no ketchup. I wouldn't eat no ketchup if it was right here beside me.
If it was here, you could have some.
But I wouldn't eat one, George. I'd leave it all for you. You could cover your beans with it and I wouldn't touch none of it.
George still stared morosely at the fire.
When I think of a swell time I could have without you, I go nuts. I never get no peace.
Lenny still knelt. He looked off into the darkness across the river.
George, you want I should go away and leave you alone?
Where the hell could you go?
Well, I could go off into the hills someplace.
How'd you eat? You ain't got sense enough to find nothing to eat.
Oh, George. I don't need no nice food with ketchup. I'd lay out in the sun and nobody'd hurt me. And I'd find a mouse, I'd keep it. Nobody take it away from me.
George looked quickly and searchingly at him.
I've been mean, ain't I?
You don't want me to go up in the hills and find a cave. I could go away anytime.
No, look, I was just fooling, Lenny. Just 'cause you stay with me. Trouble with mice is you always kill 'em. He paused. Tell you what I'll do, Lenny. First chance I get, I'll give you a pup. Maybe you wouldn't kill it. That'd be better than mice. And you could pet it harder. Lenny avoided the bait. He had sense his advantage.
If you don't want me,
Stay with me, Lenny. Jesus Christ, somebody'd shoot you for a coyote if you was by yourself.
tell me like you done before.
Tell you about what?
About the rabbits.
George snapped. You ain't gonna put nothing over on me. Lenny pleaded.
Come on, George, tell me. Please, George, like you done before.
You get a kick out of that, don't you? Ah, Wyatt, I'll tell you, and then we'll eat our supper. George's voice became deeper. God and Wrenches are the loneliest guys in the world. They had no family. They don't belong no place. They come to the ranch and wake up a steak and then go into town and blow their steak. And the first thing you know, they're pounding their tail for some other ranch. And George went on. With us, it ain't like that. We got a future. We got somebody to talk to that gives a damn about us. We don't have to sit in the bar blowing our jack just because we got no place else to go. Them other guys gets us in jail. They can rot for all anybody gives a damn, but not us. Hang on one sec. I'll be right back. Shouts out Renzo Flutes. Mad love, yo. Give me like 10 minutes. Okay. Very should be in need. Seriously, anyone watching this after the fact, you need to go subscribe to Renzo Flutes because that shakuhachi just slaps so hard. It's so good. Let me.
Not us. And why? Because I got you to look after me. And you got someone to look after you. And that's why.
He turned delightedly.
Go on now, George.
You got it by heart. You can do it yourself.
No, you. I forgot some other things. Tell about how it's gonna be.
Okay, someday we're gonna get the jack together and we're gonna have a little house and a couple acres and some cows and some pigs
And live off the fat of the land,
Lenny shouted.
and have rabbits. Go on, George. Tell about what we're gonna have in the garden. About the rabbits in the cages and about the rain in the winter in the stove. How thick the cream is on the milk. You likely can hardly cut it. Tell about that, George.
Why didn't you do it yourself? You know all about it.
No, you tell it. If I tell it, it ain't like you tell it. Go on, George. How I tend to rabbits.
Well, said George, we'll have a big vegetable patch and a rabbit hutch and chickens, and when it rains in the winter, we'll say the hell wake, and we'll build up a fire and a stove and sit around it and listen to the rain coming down on the roof. Nuts. He took out his pocket knife. I ain't got time for no more. He drove his knife through the top of one of the bean cans, sawed out the top, and passed the can to Lenny. Then he opened a second can from his side pocket. He brought two, passed one of them to Lenny. They sat by the fire and filled their mouth. George gestured with a spoon.
What you gonna say tomorrow when the boss asks you questions?
Lenny stopped chewing and swallowed. His face was, boy, that's fine, Lenny. Maybe you're getting better. When we get a couple acres, I can let you tend to the rabbits, all right. Especially if you remember as good as that. Lenny choked with pride.
I can remember,
he said. George motioned with his spoon again. Look, Lenny, I want you to look around here. You can remember this place, can't you? This ranch is about a quarter mile up that way. Just follow the river.
Sure, said Lenny. I can remember this. Didn't I remember about not gonna say a word?
Course you did. Well, look, Lenny, if you just happen to get into trouble like you always done before, I want you to come right here and hide in the bush.
Hide?
Come for you. Can you remember that?
Sure I can, George. Hide.
Rabbits.
I won't get in no trouble, George. I ain't gonna say a word.
Okay, bring your bindle over here by the fire. It's gonna be nice sleeping here, looking up at the leaves. Don't build up no more fire. We'll let it die down. They made their beds on the sand, and the blaze dropped from the fire. As the sphere of light grew smaller, hurling branches disappeared, and only a faint glimmer showed where the tree trunks once were. From the darkness, Lenny called,
George, you asleep?
George sleepily. Red and blue and green rabbits. Red and blue and green rabbits, Lenny. Millions of them.
Furry ones, George. Like I seen it there in Sacramento.
Sure, furry ones.
'Cause I could just as well go away, George, and live in a cave.
You can just as well go to hell, said George. Show. The red light dimmed on the coals. Up the hill from the river, a coyote yammered. A dog answered from the other side of the stream. Sycamore leaves whispered a little. Night breeze. Well, I got a couple things I got to get to. I was going to do this earlier, but I've just been having technical issues all day. So that's why it's such a huge shock. But Lenny always reminded me of the moon that spells shovel guy in the stand. That obviously I always got the Looney Tunes version of Lenny when I've read this book because well, obvious reasons. They always had the characters that were like George. How many cartoons had a different George and Lenny combo in them? But this book has drastically impacted our popular culture. And even though it took a while to get through that first chapter, I'm pretty confident that I can get through the rest of this book either tomorrow or this weekend. Just kind of awkward time right now because, like I said, I've been trying to do started working out of nowhere. But still, we take our blessings for what they are, blessings. I'm going to be doing this again later, but maybe hit that bell button, hit the like buttons, there'll definitely be more George and Lenny in the one love, faux faith NFA.